The worst Monday morning. Ruby Martinez wiped down the espresso machine for what felt like the 100th time that morning. Her hands were still stained with paint from the previous night's work. Tiny flecks of blue and gold clinging to her fingernails, no matter how hard she scrubbed. The Morning Brew coffee shop was packed with the usual Monday crowd. Everyone desperate for caffeine and in a hurry to get somewhere more important. She glanced at the clock. 7:15 in the morning. Only 6 more hours until her shift ended and she could get back to her real passion. The half-finished painting waiting in her tiny studio apartment. The piece was due for the community gallery showing in 3 days, and she still had so much work to do. Ruby. "Table 6 needs their order," called out Dennis, the other barista, working the morning shift. He was a good guy, always covering for her when she got lost in thought, sketching on napkins between orders. "Got it," Ruby replied, loading up a tray with 4 lattes, 2 croissants, and a blueberry muffin. She balanced the tray carefully, her art school training coming in handy for more than just painting. Years of carrying canvases and supplies had given her excellent balance, or so she thought. The collision. Ruby turned toward table 6, her mind already wandering to the color palette she needed for her painting. Should she go with burnt umber or raw sienna for the shadows? Maybe a touch of both? She was so lost in thought that she didn't see the tall man in the expensive suit stepping directly into her path. The collision happened in slow motion. 1 second, she was walking with a tray full of steaming beverages. The next second, she crashed into what felt like a wall of muscle and expensive fabric. The tray tilted, wobbled, and then gravity took over. For lattes to croissants. In one blueberry, muffin went flying through the air in a perfect arc and landed directly on the tall man's suit. Ruby watched in horror, its coffee soaked into what was clearly a custom-tailored jacket. The blueberry muffin left a purple stain across his crisp white shirt. A croissant stuck to his shoulder like a buttery badge of shame. "Oh no. Oh no, oh no, oh no," Ruby gasped, grabbing napkins from the nearest table. "I am so sorry. I didn't see you. I was thinking about paint and shadows, and I'm sorry." She started dabbing at his jacket, which only seemed to make the coffee stains spread further. Her hands were shaking, and she could feel tears of frustration building behind her eyes. This suit probably cost more than her entire month's rent. Maybe 2 months' rent. She was going to get fired. She was going to have to pay for damages. She was going to lose her apartment. An unexpected reaction. "It's okay," the man said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Really, it's just a suit." Ruby looked up and met his eyes for the first time. They were a striking shade of gray-green, like the ocean on a cloudy day. He was probably in his early 30s, dark hair that was perfectly styled except for the croissant crumbs now decorating the side. His face had sharp angles that suggested both intelligence and determination, but his expression was more amused than angry. "Just a suit?" Ruby repeated, still frantically dabbing at the coffee stains. "This is like a $5,000 suit, maybe 10,000. I don't even know how much suits like this cost, but it's definitely more than I make in a month." He gently caught her hands, stopping her frantic cleaning attempts. "I have other suits, and you're just making it worse with the napkins." Ruby noticed that her paint-stained hands were now leaving colorful smudges on his coffee-soaked jacket. Blue and gold fingerprints mixed with brown coffee stains in an abstract pattern. Under different circumstances, it might have actually looked artistic. "I'll pay for the cleaning," she said quickly. "Or for a new suit. I can make payments. I work here 6 days a week and I do art commissions on the side. It might take a while, but I promise I'll pay for everything." The man studied her face for a long moment. Ruby suddenly became very aware of how she must look. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, with several strands escaping to frame her face. She was wearing her coffee-stained work apron over a paint-splattered t-shirt. She probably had dark circles under her green eyes from staying up late working on her painting. "You're an artist?" he asked. Ruby blinked at the unexpected question. Yes. I mean, I'm trying to be... Right now, I'm mostly a barista who paints when I'm not serving coffee. Or spilling it on people." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. What kind of art do you do? Portraits mostly, Ruby said, confused about why they were having this conversation while he stood there covered in coffee and pastries. I like capturing people's stories in their faces. The tiny expressions that show who they really are beneath the surface. That sounds fascinating. It's also not helping with your ruined suit situation, Ruby pointed out. I really am sorry. Please let me pay for the damages. The man glanced down at his jacket, then back at her. Tell you what, forget about the suit. Instead, I'd like to commission a piece from you. Ruby's mouth fell open. You want to commission art from me? The person who just destroyed your very expensive clothing? Especially because of that, he said, and his smile grew wider. Anyone can have a perfect transaction. But the way you immediately took responsibility, offered to make it right, even though it would clearly be a financial burden, that tells me more about your character than a portfolio ever could. A kind gesture before Ruby could respond, Dennis appeared with a mop and a nervous expression. Ruby, maybe you should take 5 minutes to collect yourself. I'll handle the floor. Ruby nodded gratefully, still clutching the coffee-stained napkins. The man in the ruined suit started to turn away, then paused. I didn't catch your name, Ruby. Ruby Martinez? Oh, Ruby Martinez? I'll be back tomorrow for that commission discussion. And maybe another coffee, delivered more carefully this time. He pulled out his wallet and left $100 bill on the nearest table. For the cleaning supplies and your time. Wait, Ruby called as he headed for the door. I didn't get your name either. He looked back over his shoulder, coffee still dripping from his jacket sleeve. Jameson. Jameson Blake. The name hit Ruby like a second collision. Jameson Blake. As in Blake Technologies. As in the billionaire who had revolutionized cloud computing before age 30. As in the man whose face was regularly featured in business magazines with headlines like The Genius Who Changed Everything. D. Had just destroyed the suit of one of the richest men in Chicago. Ruby sank into the nearest chair, her head spinning. Jameson Blake wanted to commission art from her. Jameson Blake, who could probably buy the entire building they were standing in without checking his bank balance. You okay? Dennis asked, mopping up the coffee puddle. I just spilled 4 lattes on a billionaire, Ruby said faintly. Yeah, I recognized him, Dennis replied. Pretty sure that suit costs more than my car. Not helping Dennis. An unexpected observer. What Ruby didn't notice in her state of shock was the elderly woman sitting in the corner booth. The woman had been sketching in a worn notebook, but she had looked up just in time to witness the entire collision. She had watched Jameson Blake's face carefully throughout the interaction, noting every subtle expression, every small smile. The woman closed her notebook with a satisfied smile. After 40 years of marriage counseling, she could recognize genuine interest when she saw it. And Jameson Blake had looked at Ruby Martinez. It's like she was the most interesting person he had met in years. The coffee disaster might have ruined his suit. But something told the woman it had started, something far more important. The rest of the day Ruby spent the rest of her shift in a daze. She made drinks on autopilot, her mind replaying the conversation over and over. Jameson Blake wanted to commission art from her. He had looked at her paint-stained hands and coffee-covered apron and seen an artist, not just a clumsy barista. Between customers, she pulled out her sketchbook and started drawing from memory. The sharp angles of his face, the surprising kindness in his eyes, the way he had smiled when she called his suit expensive. Her pencil moved across the page, capturing the details she had observed in those brief moments. That's really good, said a customer, waiting for her order. Who is he? Ruby looked down at her sketch, surprised by how much detail she had captured. Just someone I met today. He looks important. He is, Ruby admitted. He's also probably never coming back here after I dumped coffee all over him. But deep down, Ruby hoped he was wrong. Not because Jameson Blake was rich or famous, but because for just a moment, he had looked at her like her art mattered. Like she mattered, and that feeling was worth more than any expensive suit could ever be. The daily visitor Tuesday morning arrived with Ruby barely sleeping. She had stayed up until 3 in the morning working on her painting, her mind too restless to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those gray-green eyes studying her face, heard that gentle voice saying her character mattered more than a portfolio. She told herself Jameson Blake wouldn't actually come back. Rich people said things like that all the time, polite promises they never intended to keep. By tomorrow, he would have forgotten all about the clumsy barista who ruined his suit. Ruby was wiping down tables at 7:30 when the door chimed. She looked up and nearly dropped her cleaning cloth. Jameson Blake stood in the doorway, wearing a different expensive suit, this one charcoal gray with a deep blue tie. He was holding a leather portfolio under one arm and had the hint of a smile on his face. "Good morning, Ruby Martinez," he said, walking straight to the counter. "I'd like a large black coffee, please, and I promise to stand very far away while you prepare it." Ruby felt her cheeks flush. "You actually came back," said I would. "I don't make promises I don't intend to keep." He settled onto one of the bar stools facing the counter. "Also, Dennis told me yesterday, this place has the best coffee in Chicago. I figure I should give it a proper try without wearing it." Dennis, restocking cups nearby, gave Ruby a thumbs up behind Jameson's back. Ruby prepared the coffee with extra care, her hands steadier than yesterday, despite her racing heart. When she set the cup in front of Jameson, he took a sip and nodded appreciatively. Dennis was right. "This is excellent. Family recipe," Ruby said. "My grandmother taught me about coffee before she taught me about painting. She always said both require patience and attention to detail." Wise woman. Jameson opened his portfolio and pulled out a checkbook. "Now, about that commission, I'd like you to paint something for the lobby of Blake Technologies. We're renovating the space, and I want art that actually means something, not just expensive pieces bought because they match the furniture." The offer. Ruby stared at the checkbook. "Mr. Blake, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think I'm the right artist for a corporate lobby. I paint portraits, personal stories, not the kind of abstract pieces that usually go in office buildings. Exactly why I want you." Jameson leaned forward, his expression intense. "Every day, thousands of people walk through that lobby. Employees, clients, visitors. I want them to see art that reminds them about human connection, about the stories we all carry. Can you do that?" Ruby's mind was already spinning with possibilities. A series of portraits showing different kinds of people, different stories, all connected by common threads of hope and determination. She could show a grandmother teaching her granddaughter to bake, a teacher inspiring students, a nurse comforting a patient. "I could," she said slowly, "but a commission like that would cost thousands of dollars. I'm still a student, Mr. Blake. I haven't proven myself yet. You proved yourself yesterday when you immediately took responsibility for an accident and offered to make it right. Even at personal cost." He wrote something in the checkbook and slid it across the counter. "This is half up front. The other half when you finish." Ruby looked down at the check and felt the room spin. $20,000. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "Right. Why not?" "Because it's too much. Because you're only offering it because you feel sorry for me. Because people will think I'm taking advantage of you." Jameson's expression hardened slightly. "Ruby, I built $1 billion company by recognizing talent when I see it. Yesterday, while you were panicking about my suit, I noticed your hands. Paint under your fingernails, calluses on your fingers from holding brushes, a small burn scar on your wrist, probably from a hot glue gun or soldering iron. Those are the hands of someone who works constantly at their craft." He gestured to her sketchbook. Peeking out from under the counter, "I also noticed you've been sketching between customers all morning. May I see?" Ruby hesitated, then slowly pushed the sketchbook toward him. Inside were dozens of quick sketches, customers waiting for drinks, Dennis making espresso, the elderly woman in the corner booth who came in every morning. Each sketch captured something essential about the person. A tired mother's protective stance, a businessman's hidden anxiety, the elderly woman's quiet contentment. The truth about Art. Jameson studied each page carefully, taking his time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were bright with something that looked like excitement. "This is exactly what I want. These aren't just drawings. They're stories. Their empathy made visible." He tapped the check. "This isn't charity, Ruby. This is an investment in genuine talent. But what if I mess it up?" Ruby's voice came out smaller than she intended. What if the finished paintings aren't good enough? Then we'll figure it out together. But I don't think that's going to happen. Jameson finished his coffee and stood up. I have a meeting in 20 minutes, but I'd like to continue this conversation. Are you free for dinner tonight? Ruby's heart jumped. Dinner. To discuss the commission, Jameson added quickly, though something in his expression suggested that wasn't the only reason. There's an Italian place 2 blocks from here. Casual, nothing fancy. 7 o'clock. Ruby found herself nodding before her brain caught up with her mouth. Okay, yes. 7 o'clock. After Jameson left, Dennis appeared at her elbow with a knowing grin. He likes you. He likes my art, Ruby corrected. Keep telling yourself that. The pattern begins Wednesday morning, Jameson came back. Large black coffee, same bar stool. Casual conversation about art and life, while Ruby worked. Thursday morning, he returned again. Friday, he arrived early enough to beat the morning rush, bringing pastries from an upscale bakery to make up for the ones that had been sacrificed in the coffee incident. By the following Tuesday, his daily visits had become routine. Ruby found herself looking forward to 7:30 every morning, the sound of the door chime and Jameson's warm greeting. They talked about everything, his childhood growing up in a trailer park before his software breakthrough, her grandmother who had raised her after her parents died, their shared love of old movies and terrible puns. Ruby learned that Jameson had a photographic memory for faces but couldn't draw a stick figure to save his life, that he had donated most of his wealth to educational programs but never talked about it publicly, that his favorite painting was Nighthawks by Edward Hopper because it captured the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people. Jameson learned that Ruby mixed her own paints from scratch because she liked controlling every aspect of color, that she had learned sign language to communicate with her deaf neighbor and now volunteered teaching art classes at a school for deaf children every Sunday, that she had never been on a real vacation because every spare dollar went to art supplies. You should travel, Jameson said one morning. See the museums in Paris, the galleries in New York, the street art in Buenos Aires. Someday, Ruby replied, steaming milk for his coffee. When I'm an established artist instead of a struggling student, you're already an artist. Ruby, the struggling part is temporary. The gallery event 3 weeks after the coffee incident. Ruby's community gallery showing finally arrived. She had invited Jameson casually, not really expecting him to come. Gallery openings in converted warehouse spaces weren't exactly billionaire territory, but at 7 o'clock on Friday night, as Ruby stood nervously next to her paintings, Jameson walked through the door. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just dark jeans and a button-down shirt that somehow made him look more approachable and more intimidating at the same time. You came, Ruby said, unable to hide her surprise. I wouldn't miss it. Jameson's eyes scanned the gallery walls, taking in her work. The paintings were all portraits, faces of people from her neighborhood. The bodega owner who had given her free fruit when money was tight, the bus driver who always waited an extra minute when he saw her running for the stop, the librarian who had introduced her to art books when she was 12. These are incredible, Jameson said quietly, stopping in front of a portrait of an elderly man feeding pigeons in the park. You can see his whole life in his eyes. The joy, the loss, the acceptance. That's Mr. Chen, Ruby explained. He's 93 and feeds the pigeons every morning at 6. He told me he does it because his late wife loved birds, and it makes him feel close to her. Jameson studied the painting for a long moment. You didn't just paint his face. You painted his love story. That's what I try to do. Show the invisible things that make people who they are. The confrontation, that's when Ruby heard a voice that made her stomach drop. Well, little Ruby Martinez, playing artist in a warehouse gallery. Ruby turned to see Trevor Hutchins, a name partner at Hutchins Gallery, one of Chicago's most prestigious art dealers. He was also the man who had rejected Ruby's portfolio 6 months ago with the words, "Come back when you have something worth selling." Mr. Hutchins, Ruby said evenly. Thank you for coming. I was in the neighborhood. Trevor's eyes swept dismissively over her paintings. Still doing these sentimental portraits, I see. You know, there's no market for this kind of work, right? Contemporary art is about challenging viewers. not making them feel comfortable. Ruby felt her face heat up. But before she could respond, Jameson stepped forward. "Disagree," he said, his voice carrying an edge Ruby had never heard before. "Art that creates genuine emotional connection is far more challenging than shock value. These paintings require vulnerability from both the artist and the viewer." Trevor's eyes widened as he recognized Jameson. "Mr. Blake, I didn't realize you were interested in this kind of amateur work." "Amateur?" Jameson's tone could have frozen fire. Ruby's work shows more technical skill and emotional intelligence than half the pieces. I've seen in galleries charging 10 times more. But then again, you wouldn't recognize real talent if it spilled coffee on you. Ruby bit back a surprised laugh. Trevor's face turned red. "With all due respect, Mr. Blake, you're a tech entrepreneur, not an art critic." "You're right. I'm not an art critic. I'm someone who appreciates authenticity over pretension." Jameson pulled out his phone. "I'm also someone who's about to purchase every piece in this gallery." "Ruby, how much for the complete collection?" Ruby's mouth fell open. "Jameson, you can't do that." "Why not?" "They're for sale, aren't they?" He looked at Trevor with a pointed expression. "Unless there's some rule about billionaires not being allowed to buy art they genuinely admire." The realization after Trevor left in a huff and the gallery crowd dispersed, Ruby pulled Jameson aside into a quiet corner. Why did you do that?" she asked. "Buying all my paintings, defending me to Trevor Hutchins. You barely know me." Jameson was quiet for a moment, his gray-green eyes searching her face. "Ruby, I've been coming to the coffee shop every morning for 3 weeks. Do you really think it's just for the coffee?" Ruby's heart hammered in her chest. "I thought you wanted to discuss the commission. Commission is real. I do want your art in my building." 8. He took a step closer. "But that's not why I keep coming back. I come back because talking to you is the best part of my day. Because you see the world in a way that makes me want to be better. Because when you look at me, you don't see a bank account or a business empire. You just see me." "Jameson," Ruby whispered, overwhelmed by the intensity in his voice. "I know this is complicated," he continued. "I know people will think you're after my money, or that I'm taking advantage of my position. But Ruby, I haven't felt this connected to another person in years. Maybe ever." Ruby wanted to step forward, wanted to close the distance between them, and see where this connection could lead. But old fears rose up in her throat. Memories of her mother's warnings about men who thought money could buy anything, including people. "I need time," she said finally. "This is all happening so fast and I need to think." Jameson nodded, though Ruby could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'll still be at the coffee shop every morning. If you want to talk." He left the gallery without another word, leaving Ruby standing alone among the empty walls where her paintings had hung. Dennis, who had been manning the refreshment table, came over with a concerned expression. "You okay?" "I don't know," Ruby admitted. "I think a billionaire just told me he has feelings for me." Yeah, that was pretty clear to everyone here. Dennis handed her a glass of wine. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Ruby thought about Jameson's words, the way he had defended her work, the way he saw her not as a struggling artist, but as someone with genuine talent. She thought about 3 weeks of morning conversations, of learning his coffee order by heart, of looking forward to 7:30 every day. "I have no idea," she said honestly. The anonymous gift a week later. Ruby received a call from the gallery owner. "Ruby, you need to come down here right away." "What's wrong?" Ruby asked, already pulling on her jacket. "Nothing's wrong. Something very right has happened." At the gallery, the owner showed Ruby a stack of receipts. "Someone has been buying your paintings. Not the ones from the show that's already done. Your older work, pieces you sold to the gallery on consignment months ago. Whoever it is has purchased every single one." Ruby's stomach sank. "Did they give a name?" "Anonymous buyer, paid through a corporate account." The owner handed Ruby a check for her share of the sales. "This is $15,000, Ruby. Your work is selling." Ruby stared at the check, a sick feeling spreading through her chest. She knew exactly who the anonymous buyer was. And suddenly, the morning coffee visits felt less like genuine connection and more like a wealthy man trying to fix her life with money. She didn't go to work the next morning, or the morning after that. She sent Dennis a text saying she needed a few days off, claiming a family emergency. In truth, she needed space to figure out if anything between her and Jameson had been real, or if she was just another charity project for a billionaire. With too much money and a savior complex, the confrontation on the third morning, Ruby's doorbell rang at 7:30. She opened it to find Jameson standing in her apartment building hallway. Still wearing his suit from what must have been an early meeting? "You're avoiding me," he said without preamble. "I'm taking the time you said I could have," Ruby replied, not opening the door any wider. "Ruby, what's wrong? Did I do something? Did you buy my paintings? The ones from months ago? Through an anonymous account?" Jameson had the decency to look caught. "Yes. Why?" Ruby's voice cracked. "Why can't you just let me succeed on my own? Why does everything have to be you swooping in with money to solve problems?" "Because I wanted to help," Jameson said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Because I saw an opportunity to support your work, and I took it. That's exactly the problem." Ruby finally let the door swing open fully, too angry to hide behind it anymore. "You see me as someone who needs saving." Poor Ruby, the struggling artist. "Let me buy her paintings. Let me give her a huge commission. Let me fix her life with my unlimited bank account." "It's not what I'm doing, isn't it?" Ruby challenged. "Be honest, Jameson. Would you have noticed me at all if I wasn't serving you coffee? Would you have looked twice at my art if I hadn't literally crashed into you?" The past revealed, Jameson was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "Do you want honesty? Fine, I'll give you honesty." He stepped into her apartment, and Ruby let him, too surprised by his tone to object. "I grew up in a trailer park in Indiana. My mom cleaned houses for wealthy families, and I went with her sometimes. I saw how those people lived, how they looked at us like we were invisible, like we only existed to serve them." He paced across her small living room, his words coming faster now. "When my software took off and I suddenly had money, you know what happened? People started treating me differently. Suddenly I was smart, interesting, worth listening to. But it wasn't me who had changed. It was just my bank balance." Ruby watched him, her anger wavering. "So yes," Jameson continued, "I notice people who work service jobs, because I remember what it's like to be invisible. And when I saw you that first day, covered in coffee and apologizing like your life depended on it, I didn't see someone who needed saving. I saw someone real. Someone genuine. Someone who treated a stranger with kindness even when she was clearly terrified." He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "I bought your paintings because they're good, Ruby, because they deserve to be seen. Not because I pity you, but because I believe in your talent." "How am I supposed to know that?" Ruby asked quietly. "How do I know this isn't just you feeling guilty about having money? How do I know people won't think I'm using you?" "You don't," Jameson admitted. "And people probably will think that. They'll assume you're after my money, that I'm having some kind of crisis and slumming it with a barista. That's what happened to my mom when she started dating my stepdad. He was a teacher, solid middle class, and his family acted like she was a gold digger. Like love can only happen between people with similar bank balances." He moved closer, his expression soft now. "But here's what I learned from watching my mom. She didn't let other people's opinions stop her from building a life with someone who made her happy. They've been married 20 years now, and they're still crazy about each other. Your mom sounds amazing," Ruby said. "And she'd like you." Jameson smiled slightly. "She'd probably also tell you I'm being an idiot by pushing too hard, too fast. My therapist says I have a tendency to try to solve problems with money because it's the one thing I have an endless supply of." "You're in therapy?" 3 years now. Turns out suddenly having $1 billion at 28 comes with some psychological challenges." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know I messed up with the anonymous painting purchase. You're right that I was trying to fix things. But Ruby, it's not because I think you need fixing. It's because when I care about someone, I want to help them succeed. That's my love language, apparently." Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm scared, Jameson. I'm scared that if we do this, I'll always wonder if it's real. I'll always wonder if you would have loved me if I wasn't someone you could help. I can't prove it's real with words, Jameson said gently. I can only show you over time. But Ruby, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to take this as slowly as you need. I'm willing to mess up and apologize and keep trying. Because that's what you do when you find someone worth fighting for. The emergency 2 days after their conversation in Ruby's apartment, her phone rang at 3 a.m. She fumbled for it in the dark, her heart already pounding with the instinctive knowledge that middle-of-the-night calls never brought good news. Is this Ruby Martinez? An unfamiliar voice asked, double quotes, yes, who is this? This is Chicago General Hospital. Your grandmother, Iris Martinez, was brought in by ambulance an hour ago. She's stable now, but she's asking for you. Ruby was out of bed and pulling on clothes before the nurse finished explaining. Stroke. Her grandmother had suffered a stroke. The woman who had taught her about coffee and painting and standing up for herself was lying in a hospital bed. She called for a taxi, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. The taxi would take 20 minutes to arrive. The hospital was 40 minutes away. Ruby paced her tiny apartment, tears streaming down her face, feeling helpless and alone. Her phone rang again. Jameson, Ruby. I just got a notification. Are you okay? How did you know about my grandmother? You listed me as an emergency contact on the commission paperwork, remember? The hospital called me too. His voice was calm, steady, exactly what she needed. Where are you right now? Home, waiting for a taxi. She's at Chicago General and I need to get there.
Taxi won't come for 20 minutes and I can't just sit here doing nothing.
I'm already on my way to you. I'll be there in 5 minutes, Jameson. It's 3 a.m.
I know what time it is.
Family is more important. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The hospital vigil Jameson arrived in 4 minutes. Driving himself in a sleek black car that probably cost more than Ruby's college tuition, but when he got out and saw her face, none of that mattered. He pulled her into a hug without a word, and Ruby let herself fall apart for just a moment, crying into his expensive shirt while he held her and murmured that everything would be okay. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur. Jameson held her hand the entire way, not saying much, just being present. When they arrived, he stayed in the waiting room while Ruby went in to see her grandmother. Iris Martinez looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed. But her eyes were alert, and when she saw Ruby, she managed a weak smile. Shh, she whispered. You're here, of course. I'm here, abuela. Ruby took her grandmother's hand carefully. Mindful of the 4, you scared me. I scared myself. Iris's words were slightly slurred, but understandable. The doctor says I need to stay here for a while. Tests, therapy, all that. However long it takes, Ruby said firmly. I'll be here. You have your showing coming up? Your commission work. None of that matters more than you. Iris squeezed her hand with surprising strength. Who brought you here? I know you don't have a car. Ruby hesitated. A friend? The billionaire friend? Iris's eyes sparkled with interest despite her condition. Dennis told me about him when he visited last week. Said some rich man has been coming to the coffee shop every day to see you. Abuela, now is not the time to talk about my love life when you get to be my age. You learn that any time is the right time to talk about love. Iris studied Ruby's face. This man, he makes you happy? He makes me confused, Ruby admitted. And scared. And yes, sometimes very happy. Good love should be all those things. The day I met your grandfather, I was terrified. He was so handsome and confident, and I was just a girl working in her father's restaurant. But he looked at me like I was the most important person in the world. Ruby felt tears well up again. I miss Abuelo. Me too, Mia. Every day. Iris's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion overtaking her. But you know what? I don't regret one moment of being scared and taking a chance anyway. Don't let fear stop you from living. The medical bills over the next week, Ruby practically lived at the hospital. She took a leave of absence from the coffee shop, worked on her painting in the hospital cafeteria between visits, and slept in the uncomfortable chairs when her grandmother needed her clothes. Jameson came by every day, bringing real food to replace the terrible cafeteria offerings, sitting quietly while Ruby worked, never pushing, but always present. He read business reports while Ruby painted, a comfortable silence settling between them on day 6. The hospital billing department called Ruby into an office. "Ms. Martinez, we need to discuss your grandmother's care," the billing specialist said. Sliding a paper across the desk, Ruby looked at the number and felt the floor drop out from under her. $68,000? Even with her grandmother's Medicare, the remaining balance was more than Ruby made in a year. "We can set up a payment plan," the specialist continued. "But we'll need an initial deposit of $5,000 to continue non-emergency treatment." "I'll figure it out," Ruby said automatically, her mind already spinning through impossible calculations. She could sell her car, except she didn't have a car. She could take out more student loans, except she was already drowning in debt. She could work extra shifts at the coffee shop, except that wouldn't even make a dent in this amount. When she returned to her grandmother's room, Jameson was there reading a book in the corner chair. He took one look at Ruby's face and set the book aside. "What happened?" Ruby shook her head, not trusting herself to speak without crying. Jameson followed her out into the hallway. "Ruby, talk to me." "The medical bills." Voice came out strangled. "It's so much money, Jameson, and I don't have it. I don't have anywhere close to it. How much?" "It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out." "Ruby, how much?" She told him, watched his face carefully for any reaction. But Jameson just nodded calmly, like she had told him the weather report. "Okay, I'll take care of it." No, Ruby's response was immediate and fierce. "Absolutely not." "Ruby, I can help. Let me help. I told you before, I don't want your money. I don't want to be another charity project for you to feel good about." Jameson's jaw tightened. "That's not what this is, isn't it? You fixing problems with money?" "That's exactly what it is." They stood in the hallway, both breathing hard, the tension between them thick enough to cut. "My grandmother is lying in that room," Ruby continued, her voice shaking, "and she's the most important person in my life. I will figure out how to pay for her care, but I will not let you buy your way into my family's crisis." "I'm not trying to buy anything," Jameson said quietly. "I'm trying to help someone I care about by throwing money at the problem." "Yes, because I have money and you need it. That's not manipulation, Ruby. That's just math." Ruby turned away, her hands clenched into fists. She wanted to accept his help so badly it hurt, but accepting would mean admitting she needed him, would mean opening the door to all her fears about being seen as a gold digger, would mean losing her independence. "I need you to leave," she said finally. "Ruby, please just listen." "Leave, Jameson." "I mean it." She watched him walk away down the hospital corridor, his shoulders tense, and felt something break inside her chest. The anonymous payment 3 days later. Ruby was called back to the billing office. "Ms. Martinez, there's been a development with your grandmother's account," the specialist said, and Ruby braced herself for more bad news. "The entire balance has been paid in full." Ruby stared at her. "That's impossible. An anonymous donor made a payment yesterday evening. Your grandmother's care is completely covered, including all future treatment related to her stroke." Ruby knew immediately who the anonymous donor was. She stormed out of the billing office, her phone already dialing Jameson's number. "I told you not to do this," she said the moment he answered. "Ruby, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. You paid my grandmother's medical bills." There was a long silence on the other end. "Can we talk about this in person?" "No. We're talking about it right now. You completely disrespected my wishes. I couldn't just stand by and watch you destroy yourself trying to pay bills you can't afford," Jameson said, his voice rising. "I have the means to help, and you're too stubborn to accept it. It's not stubbornness. It's self-respect. It's pride, Ruby. False pride that's hurting you and the people you love." Ruby felt tears of frustration burn her eyes. "You don't understand? You can't understand. You've never had to choose between your dignity and survival." "You're right," Jameson said quietly. "I haven't had to make that choice in a long time, but I have made it, Ruby. Before my company succeeded, I went to bed hungry more than once because my mom needed money for rent, and I was too proud to ask my stepdad for help. Pride doesn't keep you fed. It doesn't keep roofs over heads or pay medical bills. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept your money and pretend that doesn't change everything between us? It only changes things if you let it. Jameson's voice softened. Ruby, I love you. I want to help you because I love you, not because I think you're broken or incapable. Can't you see the difference? Ruby's breath caught. He had said it out loud with no qualifications or hedging. I love you. Jameson, she whispered. I know you need time. I know this is complicated. But your grandmother needs treatment, and you need to focus on your art. And I have the ability to remove those obstacles. Let me. I don't know if I can, Ruby admitted. I don't know if I can accept this and still respect myself, and we'll figure it out together. But Ruby, I'm not going anywhere. Whether you accept the money or not, whether we're together or not, I'm not going anywhere. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You stay. The discovery Ruby hung up the phone, feeling more confused than ever. She returned to her grandmother's room, where Iris was sitting up, eating lime jello with a look of distaste. This is terrible, Iris declared. Hospital food is a crime against humanity. Welcome back to feeling like yourself, Ruby said, managing a small smile. Mia, come sit. We need to talk. Ruby settled into the chair beside the bed, and Iris took her hand. The nurses told me someone paid my medical bills, Iris said. Anonymous donor. But we both know who it was. Abuela, I didn't ask him to do that. I specifically told him not to, and yet he did it anyway. Iris squeezed Ruby's hand. That boy loves you. That boy is a billionaire who thinks money solves everything. Or he's someone who loves you and used the resources he has to help. Iris studied Ruby's face. When I met your grandfather, his family had money. Not billionaire money, but enough to make people talk. Everyone said I was marrying him for his family's restaurant business, that I was a poor girl looking for an easy life. You never told me that, Ruby said quietly, because it didn't matter. What mattered was that your grandfather looked at me and saw Iris, not a poor girl or a potential gold digger. And I looked at him and saw Carlos, not his family's money. Iris's eyes filled with tears. We built a good life together, Mia, and we did it by focusing on who we were to each other, not what other people thought. But what if they're right? Ruby asked. What if I am just using him? What if I can't tell the difference anymore between loving him and needing his help? Then you figure it out. You talk to him. You're honest with yourself. You work through it together. Iris wiped her eyes. Love isn't about having all the answers, Mia. It's about being willing to ask the difficult questions. The revelation that night, Ruby couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what her grandmother had said, about Jameson's declaration of love, about her own conflicted feelings. Finally, at 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and went to her easel. She painted without thinking, letting her hands move across the canvas instinctively. When the sun came up and she finally stepped back to look at what she had created, Ruby caught her breath. It was a portrait of Jameson, but not like any portrait she had painted before. She had captured him not in his expensive suits or powerful COO persona, but in a quiet moment she had witnessed at the hospital. He had been reading in the corner of her grandmother's room, and a child from the pediatric ward had wandered in, lost and scared. Jameson had set aside his book immediately, gotten down on the child's level, spent 20 minutes helping the little boy find his room, making up silly stories to calm the child's fears. Ruby had captured that moment. The gentleness in Jameson's eyes, the way he had made himself small and non-threatening, the genuine care in his expression. This wasn't a billionaire playing savior. This was just a good person doing a kind thing because kindness mattered to him. Looking at the painting, Ruby finally understood what her heart had been trying to tell her. Jameson's wealth wasn't the problem. Her fear was the problem. She had been so afraid of being seen as a gold digger, so afraid of losing her independence, that she had been pushing away someone who genuinely cared about her. Someone who saw her not as a project or a charity case, but as an equal partner, deserving of love and support. Ruby picked up her phone. The conversation they met at the coffee shop at dawn before it opened. Dennis had given Ruby the keys, understanding without being told that this conversation needed privacy. Jameson arrived looking like he hadn't slept either, his hair slightly messy, his tie crooked. He sat across from Ruby at their usual table, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I painted you," Ruby said finally. "Last night. Want to see?" She pulled out her phone and showed him a picture of the portrait. Jameson studied it for a long time, his expression unreadable. "That's how you see me?" he asked quietly. "That's who you are when you think no one's watching. When you're not trying to fix anything or impress anyone? Just you being kind, because kindness matters." Jameson looked up at her, and Ruby saw vulnerability in his eyes that took her breath away. "I need to tell you something," Ruby continued. "About why I've been pushing you away so hard. About why accepting your help feels impossible." "I'm listening," Jameson said softly. Ruby took a deep breath. "When I was 16, there was a boy at my school. His name was Christopher. He came from money, not your kind of money, but enough. Country club family, summer house in Michigan, that whole world. And somehow he noticed me. The scholarship kid with paint under her fingernails." She stared down at her hands, the familiar paint stains a comfort. "For 6 months, I thought it was real. He took me to nice restaurants, bought me art supplies, told me I was talented. Then one day I overheard him talking to his friends. He was bragging about his charity project, said he was getting community service hours for mentoring an underprivileged student. Every date, every gift, every compliment had been part of fulfilling his college application requirements." Jameson's face darkened. "Ruby, I'm sorry. The worst part wasn't finding out the truth. It was realizing I had suspected all along, but ignored the signs because I wanted so badly to believe someone like him could genuinely care about someone like me." Ruby finally met his eyes. "So when you showed up in my life, this billionaire who wanted to commission my art and buy my paintings and pay my grandmother's medical bills, every alarm bell in my head started screaming. Because I've been the charity project before, and I swore I would never let myself be used that way again."
I understand,
Jameson said. "And Ruby, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong to be cautious. Christopher was a manipulative jerk who used you, and you have every right to protect yourself from being hurt like that again."
But
Ruby prompted, hearing the unspoken word. "But I'm not Christopher." Jameson leaned forward, his gray-green eyes intense. "And I need you to understand something about me, about where I come from, because I think it matters." "Jameson's story I told you I grew up in a trailer park," Jameson began. "What I didn't tell you was that for 3 years, from ages 8 to 11, my mom and I were homeless. We lived in our car, in shelters, wherever we could find space. My mom worked 3 jobs, but it wasn't enough to cover rent and food and everything else." Ruby felt her throat tighten. "There was this family," Jameson continued, "the Johnsons. They owned a small diner where my mom sometimes worked breakfast shifts. They knew our situation, and they helped us. Not in a showy way, not making a big deal about it. They just did things. Mrs. Johnson would accidentally make too much food and send leftovers home with my mom. Mr. Johnson would forget to charge for meals. Their daughter, Amy, who was my age, would bring me books from the school library because she knew I loved to read. They sound like good people," Ruby said softly. "They were. And you know what the most important thing they did was? They helped us without making us feel ashamed. They never acted like we were beneath them, or like they were doing us some huge favor. They just treated us like people who were having a hard time and deserved support." Jameson reached across the table and took Ruby's hand. "When I finally made money, real money, I went back to find the Johnsons. I wanted to pay them back for everything they had done. But Mr. Johnson had died, and Mrs.